Making games is pretty cool. Dude, you haven't uploaded in like a year. But the problem is that while everyone is making cool PC games, no one's making VR games, so I thought to myself, what's that all about? So I went out on a mission to gather VR developers all around the world so I could force them to make a VR game in 7 days. And that's how VR Jam was born. But that was like nearly a year ago. Anyways, let's start from the beginning. So the theme for this jam was musical instruments. If you've never heard of a game jam before, the premise is like very simple. You have a theme and a time limit, and you have to make a game. In this case, you had 7 days to make a VR game about musical instruments, like however you may interpret that. Here's how I did. I started off like how you start any project. You slap a cube and stretch it out to make a floating platform. Then I needed an idea for an instrument you could easily play in VR. But in VR, all you have is 2 controllers, so logically I just went with 2 drumsticks. So I made some basic drumsticks using Blender and Substance Painter. Then I slapped them into Unity and started working on a simple marimba. The thing is, music is just pitches and frequencies and shit. And what's very convenient is that Unity audio sources all have a pitch setting. That means I can make a huge marimba by just messing with the pitches and one sound. It's pretty epic. But it kind of sounds like shit. That's because the pitches in Unity are just like these weird arbitrary numbers. So what I had to do was basically tune the marimbas by ear.
Okay, so that's clearly like the first note. Dum, dum.
Once I did that, then they sounded normal. I then added a little menu so you could change the pitches, and after that I could basically play whatever I wanted on the marimbas.
We have... Yeah!
It's kind of funny how I named the pitches with numbers instead of, you know, the fucking note names. Anyways, after that I thought, why just make a boring marimba when you can just grab each marimba bar and make a fucking marimba house? So I basically made it so you can just grab as many marimbas as you want and make anything with them. Like a marimba made out of marimbas. Well, that's cool. But it was kind of lonely and boring, just being in the middle of nowhere playing a marimba. There's no way I was gonna have multiplayer or something though. So what if you could play with yourself? What I mean is clones of yourself. Here's me trying to explain the concept.
You basically click record. Oh my god, what the fuck? The idea is that your clone will play an instrument, and then it'll be the clone playing it. It's just a fucking party here.
I was just having a fucking blast dancing with clones of myself from seconds ago. Anyways, now I need to make it so they actually play the musical instruments. I got them to hold the drumsticks, but for some reason the marimbas just wouldn't play. The problem is I couldn't just slap a rigid body in there, because the clones aren't actually holding anything, they're just like following my last hand positions. But eventually I figured it out, and now the clones can play the instruments. Yeah! I even added a snare that changes volume depending on how hard you hit it. At this point, you might think, wow, this is pretty cool. But trust me, it isn't. Because right now, the only way you can play a song with multiple clones is if you have like subhuman timing, because the clones are not in sync with each other at all. Unfortunately, I did not have the brain capacity and time to implement like syncing. The footage you're seeing right now is from like 6 in the morning, desperately trying to pull something together. So at this point, I just made a really crappy map so the player isn't in a void. Made it so you can toggle the clone recordings for however long you wanted to. Added some text to guide the player, and that's all I had time for. Overall, I'm pretty proud of what I was able to make in such a short time span. And the cool thing about game jams is that after you made your own game, you get to see what other people have made. This game made by Running on Coffee turned the theme into a gallery shooter type minigame. Toreador Games made an awesome VR trumpet, which might literally be the first ever playable VR trumpet in history. Standard 95 made a game where you play as a drummer in the Napoleon Wars. That's literally what it says. Inspiring the troops to help them win the battle. This next one might be my favorite from this jam though. Mossbone Digital made a hand tracking game where you have a small MIDI keyboard that makes this like synth sound. You also have like buttons for like a drum sequence and stuff. I literally spent like half an hour in this one just vibing, playing with the MIDI keyboard in this like liminal kitchen. Lastly, we have Guitar Zero by JK Labs, which puts you into this like grungy basement and emulates that like Guitar Hero but in VR sort of vibe. Overall, I think everyone in this jam did a phenomenal job. I just love how everyone had a different take on the theme. Okay, this one was kind of tragic for me, but I'll tell you what happened anyways. So the theme for this one was electricity. And while I could have just made a simple game with this theme, for some reason, I decided that I would instead try to make this like elaborate puzzle game with like this big level where you have to like piece things together to get to the end of the game. I'm pretty sure the idea of this game was like you're in a room using a computer or something, then the power goes out, so you have to like explore this abandoned facility place. The vibe of the game was gonna be dark and rainy with a thunderstorm outside, and honestly, it could have made for an interesting game. But this is a game jam. There was a strict time limit, and by the time I even started working on the game, a couple of days on the deadline had already passed. The fact that I started late didn't help at all, but overall, I feel like the game idea was kind of all over the place anyways, and I doubt I would have been able to piece something together, even if I spent like every minute of the deadline working on it. This jam served as like a learning lesson for me, not to go overboard with ideas, not to try and make some like crazy elaborate game, but just make something that's fun, right? For this jam, I wanted to try making my game in Unreal Engine 5, even though I barely had any experience with it. But since the theme was zero gravity, I immediately thought about going for like a Lone Echo style game. Lone Echo is like one of the best VR games I've ever played. I wanted to see if I could capture that space sort of look, because I knew I probably wouldn't be able to get the look I wanted in Unity. So I opened up the VR template and started messing around.
Hey you, check out my balls.
Unreal Engine is like very blueprint focused, and I had basically no experience with blueprints. Honestly, I just generally hate nodes. Like, I've never liked Blender's node system or like shader graph stuff. I'm just not a big fan of node-based systems. But it felt like blueprints was like my only option.
Do not mess with the current C++.
Anyways, making everything zero gravity was pretty simple. You just go into an object and basically click a button. What I love about Unreal Engine is how much stuff you can find on the marketplace that does the work for you. For example, for the skybox, I used Ultra Dynamic Sky, and I literally just turned the sky mode to space, and it gave me this beautiful skybox with that light glow like sort of look you would expect to see in space. It also helped that the default VR hands already look sci-fi in Unreal, so I didn't have to like make a new hand model. But anyways, since the theme is zero gravity, logically, we need some epic zero gravity movement. Luckily, I found this tutorial that does exactly what I wanted to. Shout out to this GigaChat for helping with an issue. That gave me the ability to have that same movement style like Lone Echo, where you can like grab onto stuff and yeet yourself forward.
No! Shit.
But other than yeeting yourself around, I also wanted to have some like hand boosters like in Lone Echo. Yeah, this game is pretty much just turning into a Lone Echo ripoff. After messing around with some nodes, I got it somewhat working. Basically just taking the forward vector of the hand and adding force to the character in that direction. Then I added an indicator over the hands that shows how much boost charge you have, which generates back pretty quickly. At this point, my blueprint was looking like a bunch of fucking spaghetti everywhere, which is very convenient. I literally spent like half an hour trying to fix a bug, but it ended up not being a bug at all, but just two nodes that were not connected in the right order.
Yes. Oh my god, I'm such a...
I swear, my brain is just not used to nodes because there's no way I could have made a mistake like that with code. Okay, now we have locomotion and a few days left to make a game with it, because of course I fucking started late again. So I started by gathering up some like reference of spaceships and stuff. I drew a basic sort of top-down layout of how the ship level would be, basically designing it in 2D so then I could easily recreate it in 3D. After that, I took the design and started tracing over it in Blender. The problem is that for some reason Unreal Engine and Blender have a very toxic relationship. I swear, trying to design a level in Blender while using Unreal Engine like feels impossible. So instead, what I tried using is the Unreal Engine Cube Grid system. It basically allows you to like use voxels to make stuff in 3D. But that would be way too unoptimized, so I figured something even better. The modeling mode. This mode is really good. It lets you create all sorts of shapes and stuff in Engine. So I started tracing out the ship using this mode, basically just making a prototype level to visualize how the ship will look. I also wanted to plan ahead and start using bake lights so I could like get the game running on Quest 3. But I mainly started doing this because for some reason my frame rates were terrible.
It should be like 120.
I was so confused because the scene I made seemed pretty simple. Now, I don't know how it was dipping so low on my 3090. At first, I was convinced that maybe I was using too many lights or like my settings were too high or something. But after a lot of wasted time, I realized what happened is a temporal super resolution was for some reason turned on by default in Unreal Engine 5. And that was just terrible for VR. After I switched that off, my FPS went right back to a smooth 120. I swear, there was like multiple instances while using Unreal Engine 5 where something was going wrong, and the solution almost always was because some random button in the project settings was on or off, but like wasn't supposed to be. Anyways, I kept working on the level, and it started to feel pretty cool to move around the ship. The layout was working exactly like I wanted it to, and I could start to imagine how the final game could look. But before I knew it, I fell into the same trap again. I was shooting for the stars. I planned out this like elaborate story about how like the player would start by waking up in a sleep chamber, going through the ship and doing his job where like you use the console to go to a nearby asteroid. You would land at the asteroid, then you would go to the mining arm where you would use the mining arm to mine the asteroid. Yeah, no shit. But then the twist would be that the asteroid had some like alien virus in it and it would explode all over the ship. Then once you woke up, you would have to traverse through the ship in zero gravity, trying not to touch the virus so it doesn't consume you. Yeah, it's literally just lone echo. But eventually you get to this sort of like power room in the ship where you switch the power on, but a virus bubble nearby explodes and you start choking from the spores. And as your screen fades to black in the background, you hear like, warning, warning. Automatic decontamination started, and that's the last thing you'd hear. The fate of the player would be left unknown and the credits would roll. Absolute cinema. Except yeah, there's no fucking way you can do all that in just a couple of days. Even if I had gotten all the mechanics working, I still didn't want to submit the game looking so prototypey. Anyways, yeah, I didn't end up finishing this game too. I made the classic stupid mistake of trying to make a freaking Steam release in a week again. This time, I will learn from my mistakes. This time, I made sure to start working on the game sooner. The winning theme was connectivity. I know a lot of people were gonna go for like a cable connecting type game, so I immediately tried to avoid that. Instead, I tried to think about what connectivity means in like a wider scheme of things. The idea I came up with is a game where there's characters around the level that you interact with. After you interact with them, you sort of connect to them and become that character. Now, as that character, you can, for example, access areas that you couldn't as like your last character, or like maybe piece together puzzles with like multiple characters and like different perspectives. I really like this idea, so I started off like how you start any project. You slap a cube and stretch it out to make a floating platform. Then I thought, if I was gonna make it so you're basically swapping characters in a level, it would probably look pretty cool if like your last character was frozen in place exactly where you were. So to achieve that, I had to use a full body IK system, which took a little bit of time to implement.
This is fucking stupid. What is my what is my index finger doing? I have turned into a fucking helicopter. I think we are finally done with the character. So we can move around, we have the whole body, can interact with our hands, can grab objects, throw them and stuff, and we can teleport. So yeah, I think this is pretty good player controller. But yeah, we just kind of spent like 6 hours doing this. Oh no.
After pretty much spending the entire day getting it working, I finally had the full body working like I wanted it to.
God damn. Why does this character have such a thick neck? Yeah.
Next, I started working on the first section of the map. I went with like a very minimalistic, super hot looking art style, mainly because I was trying to avoid focusing too much on the visuals like I did with the other failed games. I just wanted an art style where I could easily make the map bigger and not have to worry about it. And this was perfect for that. Something I never knew about that I found out during the making of this game is that apparently Unity has a real-time global illumination button that I like never noticed. Turning that on enhanced the visuals without causing much performance drops, which was pretty epic. Okay, now that we have a little map, I can start working on the character swapping, which was just,
What the fuck? Yeah. What the Alright, attempt number 2. Oh. Okay, so it's not working yet, but we've made some progress. Come on, man. Come on. I'm so close. Alright, it should finally work. I should be able to switch with this character by holding its hand. Oh my god. What the fuck? Please, just fucking work. Of course, it did not fucking work. Okay, so it's been an entire fucking day, but we finally got it working. You can grab a hand. Oh my fucking god. Okay, so you can hold the hand, and boom, you'll be on the other guy on the other side. Then you can hold it again, and boom. How sick is that? It's still not totally perfect. I still need to fix some issues, but this is a pretty cool concept in my opinion.
Next, I started expanding the map, thinking about some puzzles I could add. For example, for the first puzzle, there's a jail cell in the wait, so you have to swap with the character, break through the jail walls, find a key, give the key back to the last character, open the gate, and then you can continue. It's not the craziest puzzle design, but I think the whole body swapping thing is a pretty cool concept. The problem is, I didn't realize until days later how boring it is to have to like walk back to the last character, hold their hand, and then walk back to where you wanted to go. But by the point I realized that, it was way too late to go back and make changes. I'd be risking spending another day just trying to fix bugs like before. So learning from my mistakes from the last jams, I realized that some stuff just has to be let go, and you have to focus on actually like finishing the game. Anyways, I don't really want to spoil too much of this game because if you have a headset, I want you to go check it out and play it for yourself. But to summarize the next couple of days, I basically spent the rest of the time making the map bigger, adding puzzles, and fixing a lot of bugs. I even made a cool elevator with the mirror where you can like see the character you're in. I also made some doors that only specific colored clones can open, which honestly took quite a while because I had to like dynamically assign a color name to each clone every time you switch and stuff. The last couple of days were spent building the deep areas of this like facility thing that you use the elevator to go down to, which I'm not gonna spoil. Also adding like rooms you could only access as certain clones. I even spent some time making a little soundtrack for the game, with each clone having their own theme. If you play the game and pay attention, there's actually a subtle story in the background you might be able to read into. Anyways, I know I'm skipping a lot of details, but after a week of hard work, I finally got the game done. This wasn't intentional at all, but what I realized after finishing this game is that this fourth game was kind of like a collection of all the other games together. You have the clones of the first game, the overall setting of the second, the story and puzzle elements of the third. It was all a very poetic ending. Well, not really, because there's gonna be more jams, but now it's your turn to join me and other VR developers for the next VR jam. I try to host this jam at least once a month or so if you want to network with other VR developers and make some VR games, join the VR jam Discord server down in the description. It doesn't matter if you're just starting out or if you're an experienced game developer, we welcome anyone to join. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.